about it's not for amplification. It's for recording. Some of the Sunday school teachers have asked if I could record this. Ken is going to add video in just a bit, but this will make it so that I'm audible. You might consider this a pro or a con, but it's not going to pick up your voices. So when there's questions, I'll do my best to summarize or comments, but that can also be a pro because what you say, you don't have to worry about saying it perfectly. It's not going to be recorded for posterity. I'm the one that has to worry. I'm going to begin with the 2019 Wells Synod Convention, which was held at Martin Luther College in New Ulm, Minnesota at the end of July. Someone from Living Hope was able to attend that, and that's Ryan Olson, because Ryan serves on the church council of the synod, so he was there as an advisory delegate. The theme of the convention was for the generations to come. It is well, you could say it's based on a few different passages of the Bible. Among other passages, Psalm 78, which we're going to look at in a little bit. And another way we could state the theme is passing down the gospel to the generations to come, which is the chief way that God designed the gospel to be spread in the home. So the keynote presentation for the convention, I suppose you could say, was in some ways portrayed a dire picture, because into a trend that has that every denomination of Christianity has seen in America, and that's very much a downward trend. So I don't want to really start off the year on a super sour note, but I would like to contextualize what we're about to do with a look at reality. This kind of borrowing from this presentation helps me to do that. A second reason why I'm borrowing from it is although it starts out with a kind of dire numbers, it's a very inspirational address. It's not just somebody reading a paper, but he's talking to you. He portrays what the situation is for the Wisconsin Synod and for Christianity in America right now, but then reminds us of God's promises and concrete steps that we can take to approach this. Some of that is what we're talking about in Bible class this year, apologetics. Let's go to Psalm 78 first. If you grab the Bible from the back, you can follow along in the Bible. Psalm 78 is quite long. I am just taking parts of the first few verses to give you the flavor of it. The psalmist talks about the things our fathers have told us. We will not hide them from their children. We will tell the next generation the praiseworthy deeds of the Lord, his power and the wonders he has done, which he commanded our forefathers to teach their children, so the next generation would know them, even the children yet to be born, and they in turn would tell their children. This was written specifically in the context of the people of Israel. You may remember when God really, in a way, first gave birth to the nation. They were slaves in Egypt, and then God had them celebrate the Passover after the first 9 plagues in Egypt, and then God had them celebrate the Passover after the first 9 plagues, and the Passover set the scene for their exodus from Egypt. And God said to them, this meal that you're having with the Passover and these things that you're doing, I want you to keep on celebrating this every year. And when your kids ask you, why are we doing this? That's your teaching moment. That's when you say, this is what the Lord did to bring us out of Egypt. This is how we got where we are, and this is who we are. God designed that to take first and foremost in the home. And he had these mechanisms built into the calendar to do that. Not just the Passover, but other things as well. God made a structure for all this stuff. You might look at it like this. Push down one domino, and the rest fall. And they're not falling in a bad way, but they're falling in a good way. because of the actions of one generation, and the next generation tells their kids, and they in turn tell their children. That means that 10 generations down the road, they don't have the gospel simply because of their parents, but because of all of those links in the chain. Now, what's going on in Western civilization, maybe primarily today? You take out 1 or 2 generations, and what happens to the gospel? It stops. Maybe this is an illustration of what's going on today. I'm going to add one more thing to it. It's almost as if the preceding generations it's like they haven't stopped at not passing it on, but in many, many ways are working against it and pushing back. A sort of a firewall, especially in campuses, in the media, in things that are just that are very close to the younger generation, telling them that these things are foolish. The new God that seems to be rising up to take its place. We might say, well, science and materialism, maybe we could just boil it down to materialism, that the material world is all there is. If that's the way you see the world, that's going to have consequences on the way that you live in the world. Putting some numbers on it. So this is our church body. Wells, gains and losses by 5-year groupings over the past 50 years. After World War II, Christianity really surged in America. You can imagine why there's all these people that are coming back from war and then having kids, and you also have people that are coming back from the horrors of war. And thinking about deeper things. Christianity really surged. We're talking about gains and losses. So in our church body from 1969 up until 1990, it was 1991, gains every year. The Wells is growing and growing and growing. Following a trend that the rest of our society, Christianity in our society, was seeing too. Notice though how the declines get smaller, and then the increases get smaller, and then turn into declines. And you could pretty much draw a straight line down there, couldn't you? So where would you expect that line to continue if we were to project? It's difficult to see that all of a sudden. Seeing a year like this, isn't it? To call this a trend is maybe an understatement. It's 50 years. It's not a fad. It's not something that appears to be passing quickly. Another way to look at it. Okay, America's changing religious landscape. So for each one of the lines on the graph, you have a different religious grouping. Even evangelical and mainline Christianity, those are a little nebulous to me, but mainline Christianity, think of denominations, especially the larger ones. Evangelical, I usually think of more of the non-denominational. We have Roman Catholic. You have other religions down there too. So the ones I really want to draw out for you is mainline. This is as a percentage of our population. This isn't all that long ago. I mean, this is about the time I was born. Close to 30% of Americans, belonged or claimed to belong to a mainline denomination. When I was born, about 5% identified as atheists. Look at the difference. Look at the difference there. It seems to me like a blink of the eye, and I was just arriving at Living Hope as its pastor. It was 14 years ago now. If we go back to there, they met each other then. So these are radical changes that don't seem to be changing. To help us keep things in perspective and be thankful, Here's Living Hope's average weekly attendance. The numbers when you go to the Synod website where this stuff is, it shows us right there to start at 2006. If I were to, it helps give some perspective to see 2005 right there. We had a big jump and then went down. But the trend is certainly different. Why have we hit a ceiling right there? Certainly a number of different factors involved. I would say that we can't, that we shouldn't say that the greater moral and societal landscape is that we're immune from that somehow. Interesting homophone play on words sort of thing is the nuns. And religiously, you think of nuns. Okay, you think of like the female monk. The new nuns are people who claim no religious affiliation at all, which in 1940 was 5%. When I got to, let's say, 15%, now we've almost doubled we're almost double where we were when I came to Living Hope, when probably the youngest of us in here were born. The next one is going to look at this generationally. Oh, not quite yet. 36 million religiously unaffiliated Americans in 2007. 10 years later, it's almost doubled. Okay, now generationally. Whatever you think about being lumped together in a group, there's probably something to it that the way that we see the world and act is influenced by the age in which we grow up. Let me get rid of it. Okay, you got the greatest generation on one side. Generation Z, I'm thinking like maybe born around like 2000. Somebody can help me out if, but after millennials, I think I'm Generation X. The ones to pay attention to is if we combine maybe none of these, atheist, agnostic. So the irreligious, completely irreligious. We go from a total of about 20% over there to 27, 35% there. So these are all current day statistics. Just current day statistics looking at different generations. What does that tell us about the future prospects of Christianity from a human standpoint? As these generations get older than their kids, if we relate it back to the dominoes, do we see that this is maybe snowballing for the generations to come? The older generation influences the younger generation. That can be for better or for worse, however. Okay, enough of the statistics. None of this should really surprise us. This is in the Bible. This is in the Bible, and the passage that I'm about to show you, you may already know what I'm going to look at. So days before Jesus died on the cross, he was teaching his disciples by the Temple Mount that King Herod was putting the finishing touches on this one of the greatest structures. It's called the greatest structures the world has ever seen, and the disciples were marveling at the stones. And Jesus told them, the day is going to come when not one stone will be left on another. And he goes off on this whole chapter talking about how Jerusalem is going to see its last day. That would come relatively soon in 70 A.D. But that really morphs into the world seeing its last day as well. So this is what he says to his disciples. Then you will be handed over to be persecuted and put to death, and you will be hated by all nations because of me. At that time, many will turn away from the faith and will betray and hate each other. And many false prophets will appear and deceive many people. Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold, but the one who stands firm to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. I wonder what the disciples' reaction was. Jesus said it. Many will turn away from the faith. The love of most will grow cold. Of course, this is something that the disciples could see well within the year in which Jesus said it. They were persecuted and put to death. We don't see too much of that today. They saw the love of most growing cold and people falling away. When we see it today, we might see it on a larger scale in a different way, but we still see the same thing that Jesus was talking about happening. I want to give you some insight into my own heart and worldview. This passage, I could say, in a strange way, has been a comfort to me at times. Like, the church isn't growing. We have this many visitors and only this many translate into members. A lot of people that I spend a lot of time with just walk away. You can see this. I'm sure that you've had the same experiences. And I think, well, that's what Jesus says. The love of most will grow cold. Many will turn away. That's good to realize that. But where we need to be careful about that is we need to be careful about letting that engender this notion of defeatism in ourselves. That, jaded, it's not going to do any good anyway. And then we no longer work with the zeal that Jesus assumes when he's talking about people being handed over to be persecuted and put defeatism. The church, God's people there's no place for that in God's church. And this is what struck me. I don't think it's been in the too distant past. When I look at this thing, the love of most will grow cold. I've always thought of that referring to the people that are fallen away. But should I understand that differently? Is that me? And you look at it in the context. Because of the increase of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold. You see the world going to hell in a handbasket all around. Nothing that I do isn't going to do any good anyway, whether the church keeps its doors open or spends $30,000 more of my offerings and increases its program. There's a lot better ways to spend that money, better ways. Then it's my love that's growing cold. And that's something else to watch out for in these last days. Many false prophets will appear and deceive many people. That was happening in the first century. That's still happening in the 21st century. I wonder if the nature of the most successful false prophets has changed. Maybe not so much claiming or identifying themselves as religious people, but touting themselves as smarter people, more moral people. The biggest charges and perhaps the most effective that I see coming from secularism today, or this materialistic worldview, isn't just that Christians are wrong, but that their view of the world and faith in God is dim-witted and dangerous, which I find to be I find incredibly interesting. So, in a materialistic world, which there's nothing but the physical realm, there are no objective standards of right and wrong. I'm a clump of cells. I'm going to be gone, and so is the whole Earth in the blink of an eye as far as the age of the universe is concerned, as they would state it. It doesn't matter. It's the way the world works. And the world can work however you want it to if you've got the power to do it. So in that worldview, I find it fascinating how hyper-moralistic we've become. You say something wrong on Twitter, maybe not us, but if you're famous, and you spell something wrong on Twitter or use the wrong pronoun, how you're attacked and you're just lynched. So you see these two very opposite ideas going on. On the one hand, there is no morality, at least those Christians dim-witted. On the other hand, that there's only one morality, and whoever has the most popular support or the biggest platform owns it. When it comes to morality, I think that this is an area now, kind of getting into apologetics a little bit, where Christians can maybe ask questions of people who have started to subscribe to that way of thinking and get them to think about the way that they think and their view of the world and whether it's maybe contradicts itself or not. One person that has gained a lot of popularity in advocating for a scientific view of morality, a scientific objective basis for morality, is a man named Sam Harris. I'm not encouraging you to listen to him, but I'm going to show you a little clip in a debate in which he was involved in a bit. What he's popularizing really doesn't stand even the humanistic philosophical test. I want to show you a clip as an example of apologetics. I want you to bear with me. It's about 5.5 minutes long. And we're going to hear a very good Christian apologist respond to him on a rational level.
So we've not heard any objection to a theistic grounding for ethics. If God does exist, it's clear, I think, obvious even, that we have a sound foundation for objective moral values and duties. Now, what if God does not exist? Is there a sound foundation, first of all, for objective moral values? Now here, Dr. Harris said you don't need religion in order to have universal morality. Again, that's a confusion. Of course you don't. Remember, the Nazis, for example, could have won World War II and established a universal morality. The issue isn't universality. The issue is objectivity. And I'm maintaining that in the absence of God, there isn't any reason, any explanation for the existence of objective moral values. Now, Dr. Harris says, but we can imagine creatures being in the worst possible misery, and it's obviously better for creatures to be flourishing. The well-being of conscious creatures is good. Well, of course it is. That's not the question. We agree that all things being equal, flourishing of conscious creatures is good. The question is rather, if atheism were true, what would make the flourishing of conscious creatures objectively good? Conscious creatures might like to flourish, but there's no reason on atheism to think that it would really be objectively good. Now here, Dr. Harris, I think, is guilty of misusing terms like good and bad, right and wrong, in equivocal ways. He will often use them in non-moral senses. For example, he'll say there are objectively good and bad moves in chess. Now that's clearly not a moral use of the terms good and bad. You just mean they're not apt to win or produce a winning strategy. It's not evil what you've done. And similarly, in ordinary English, we use the words good and bad in a number of non-moral ways. For example, we say Notre Dame has a good team. Now, we can hope it's an ethical team, but that's not what's indicated by the win-loss record. That is a different meaning of good. Or we say that's a good way to get yourself killed. Or that's a good game plan. Or the sunshine felt good. Or that's a good route to East Lansing. Or there's no good reason to do that. Or she's in good health. All of these are non-moral uses of the word good. And Dr. Harris's contrast of the good life and the bad life is not an ethical contrast between a morally good life and an evil life. It's a contrast between a pleasurable life and a miserable life. And there's no reason to identify pleasure misery with good and evil, especially on atheism. So there's just no reason that's been given on atheism for thinking the flourishing of conscious creatures is objectively good. But Dr. Harris has to defend an even more radical claim than that. He claims that the property of being good is identical with the property of creaturely flourishing. And he's not offered any defense of this radical identity claim. In fact, I think we have a knockdown argument against it. Now, bear with me here. This is a little technical. On the next to last page of his book, Dr. Harris makes the telling admission that if people like rapists, liars, and thieves could be just as happy as good people, then his moral landscape would no longer be a moral landscape. Rather, it would just be a continuum of well-being whose peaks are occupied by good and bad people or evil people alike. Now, what's interesting about this is that earlier in the book, Dr. Harris explained that about 3 million Americans are psychopathic. That is to say, they don't care about the mental states of others. They enjoy inflicting pain on other people. But that implies that there's a possible world which we can conceive in which the continuum of human well-being is not a moral landscape. The peaks of well-being could be occupied by evil people. But that entails that in the actual world, the continuum of well-being and the moral landscape are not identical either. For identity is a necessary relation. There is no possible world in which some entity A is not identical to A. So if there's any possible world in which A is not identical to B, then it follows that A is not in fact identical to B. Now, since it's possible that human well-being and moral goodness are not identical, it follows necessarily that human well-being and goodness are not the same as Dr. Harris has asserted in his book. Now, it's not often in philosophy that you get a knockdown argument against a position, but I think we've got one here by granting that it's possible that the continuum of well-being is not identical to the moral landscape. Dr. Harris's view becomes logically incoherent. And all of this goes to underline my fundamental point that on atheism, there's just no reason to identify the well-being of conscious creatures with moral goodness. Atheism cannot explain the reality, the objective reality of moral values.
My point in showing that to you is so that you can just be assured that if you come to every Bible class, by the end of the year, that'll be you. You believe me? That's not what we're shooting for either. Sorry for taking so long to make the point. I think it's good to see that there are eloquent people that can discuss and refute these things at high levels. That's not realistic for all of us. He's getting into he's defending religion with more philosophy here. That's not our intent. Neither is it our intent to be able to stand, toe to toe with somebody who feels strongly just about their secularism as we do about our Christianity, and show them who's boss. Okay, we're not talking about winning arguments. We're talking about being able to speak God's truth in an intelligible way in the setting that we're in. And a lot of that can be done not just by making positive arguments, but simply by asking people questions that get them to think through their own worldview, maybe in a sense putting a stone in their shoe. That's part of it, but also opening up the door to tell them what it is that really changes hearts. We're going to spend more time on that in our next class about the right place and the limitations of apologetics. Having looked at those statistics at the beginning, and then And then we'll be looking at Matthew chapter 24, and then this video, whatever that may have kind of conjured up for you. I wonder if we can just speak about who we are, what we have in our context, the context that we're in, the age and place in which we live, and identify some of our own strengths and weaknesses and the opportunities and the threats that our environment, that our society provides for us or presents to us. So we're doing a SWOT analysis of everything. Excuse me? The people in this room. Ralph? Okay, I appreciate that one. Our church body does have a higher standards of education than most churches, and that's certainly a blessing. Catherine?
Just on an individual level, but I'm sure others can identify. As far as weaknesses are concerned, fear of being ostracized. I go to a liberal arts college where if I speak even about my job, about my faith, there's a threat of me being not getting the same opportunities as other students.
Fear. Fear of the repercussions. I think we could very good. I think we can expand maybe on that a little bit more. You don't have to answer out loud, but have there ever been times when you've had the opportunity in a conversation, maybe with somebody close, that is expressing a really deep problem or need or questions, and you've been afraid? There's been an opportunity, but you've been afraid to make use of it because you're afraid of not saying the right thing? That might come into play. So there's a fear of being ostracized, but maybe there's a fear of messing up too, that maybe you're not up to the task. Okay, we've got a strength, we've got a... Ryan? Making it the opportunity to make a case for meaning and purpose in life, especially to the nuns. I don't think we're making a caricature of the situation if we think that everybody who doesn't go to church or isn't interested in religion is like Sam Harris, that's ready to sit on a platform and defend their beliefs down to the death. For most might have something they heard from him or someone like him before, and that might be an excuse, but there's not a well thought out view of the world. And does it strike you that in an era where at this moment, I'm not sure if the United States has ever been wealthier. It's been a long time since the unemployment rate has been as low as it is. And if you can look at that line of wealth and then look at the suicide rate, it's going up just as fast. There's this vacuum of hope. There isn't any there, or meaning. And people that turn to Tinder or to their bank account or their stock portfolio to find it, that doesn't last very long. We certainly have an opportunity there.
Just being in the Gen Z or millennials, like I see so many wanderers who are without meaning or who are hungry for it. They might not necessarily be politicized, but they're hungry for it.
Great. Morris?
A strength of our congregation or synod is that we have faith, and from that faith we have knowledge about Jesus and God, and so we know the truth, and that's on our side. That's
No quotation marks.
No truth. It is the, that's right. It is the truth. No quotation marks.
If I could build off of that, I think that people are guilty of this on both sides. But I think that we're prone to caricature the arguments of the other side, and they also, as well, the real stand of Christianity. A lot of the criticisms that I hear from secularists or atheists about Christianity are not what we believe, and it's more of what heterodox churches are teaching. We have with the truth, it's by faith that we believe what God says. That's a matter of faith, but it is also it is also a structure. I got to be careful I say this. That is whole. That makes sense. That isn't picked apart so easily. That's more nuanced than it's often made out to be. I think that's strength. So threats, I would say the threats are what we largely encapsulated by what we looked at in those first few slides. The love of most growing cold, people turning away, not only passing on the gospel to the next generation, but opposing it. A threat would be our own apathy toward that too with our kids. Sorry, Ryan, if I'm not saying this right, but in a conversation that we were having, I think you said that one of the strongest indicators of whether a person will stay in the faith, stay Christian, is whether their dad would sing out loud in church. And I'm not, this isn't to criticize anybody that doesn't sing out loud in church. But can we maybe identify what the power that would have on a young person? First of all, their dad's with them in church. And if their dad's willing to do something that makes him seem kind of foolish, this must be something that's really important to him. That influences a kid. And I think if that influences a kid, what other things that we do as parents, the way we show our priorities, the way that husband and wife repent and forgive each other, that's huge. So maybe a threat, but there's an opportunity. Ralph.
For a society that's supposed to be totally connected, we are...
Nice. How did you do that?
For a society that's supposed to be totally connected, we are totally disconnected. Come on, Jordan.
You could not have planned that any better.
Again, for a society that's totally connected, that's supposedly disconnected, we are totally disconnected. You have, people hide behind electronics. It goes off. And you can't control it. So instead of having God created us to have connections, human contact, and the society today is disconnected from that.
Loneliness, community.
And that's like that. And that's one of the reasons I think there's this story. So that disconnected, the human, the social disconnection, not digitally, socially connected. That's not needs. That's not what a person needs.
Yeah. I often, I've heard many times, maybe I've said it myself, like, I know church isn't a social club, but I understand what's bad about viewing church as just a place where you come and meet friends, like it's a fraternity or sorority or something like that. But let's not shy away from the community aspect of church either. We don't come in here and sit together like this just because it's the most efficient way for me to teach people, and if I taught all of you individually over the course of the week and preached individually, that would take forever. That's not why. We gather together as community to encourage one another. Those connections are important. It is a social club. It's just not based on that we all like to knit or play video games or like dogs or cats. I mean, there's lots of differences among us in all those ways, especially when it comes to cats, I think. But the foundation of our community is Jesus and his forgiveness that heals relationships. And that's what it does. It brings us together with God and brings us together with each other. Very good. Turn back to this passage for one more opportunity, and then list one more after that. Many will turn away from the faith and betray and hate each other. Notice that it's not just Christians that are having a hard time here, but it's the people that are turning away from the faith. I guess this has already come up in a lot of the things that were said, but there's a lot of hurt people. When you throw God's love and his will for the world out the window, you're going to cause yourself and the others around you a lot of pain. The gospel addresses that pain and is the only thing that can finally heal it. Even if not completely this side of heaven, it's the only thing that can heal it. And then maybe the last strength is when Peter said, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus said, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah. It's not revealed to you by man, but by my Father in heaven. On this rock of your confession, I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it." The church will endure. Not the wells will endure, not this congregation, but the church will. Looking at the graphs, it looks like maybe Jesus has decided just to kick back his feet in heaven, give up on us. That's not what's going on. Historically, it's been through the roughest times, the times of persecution, even out of the times of false doctrine, that God has brought about revival in the spread of the gospel. All right, it's about revival in the spread of the gospel. All right, it's about time we talk about, well, what are we talking about with apologetics? Okay, apologetics. The term comes from this passage in 1 Peter chapter 3. I don't think we're going to be able to do it total justice today, but I can at least expose you to the concept is throughout the scripture. The word comes from here, and also the concept you can see as well. So, who will harm you if you are eager to do what is good? But if you should happen to suffer because of righteousness, you are blessed. Do not be afraid of what they fear, and do not be troubled, but regard the Lord the Christ as holy in your hearts. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give a reason for the hope that is in you, but speak with gentleness and respect, while maintaining a clear conscience. Life in Christ may be put to shame because they slandered you as evildoers. 1 Peter has a lot about suffering for doing what is right. It's a lot about suffering, but especially suffering what's doing what is right. If you do suffer on account of righteousness, it's not that God is given up on you. You're blessed. God is still pouring out his blessing on you. The word apologetics in here is answer. It's answer. The Greek word is apologia, which is apologia. apologia. It's what apology comes from, but not apology in the sense of regret or repentance, like I'm sorry. This is, well, let me just give you some other instances of where the word is used in the New Testament. Paul, apologetic journey, is basically attacked by a mob in Jerusalem. Jews claiming that he had taken a Gentile into the temple area, which was just their excuse. They're about to kill him. The Roman guards, soldiers step in. He's arrested. And Paul says, I'm a Roman citizen. Can I make my defense? And his apologia is the ensuing speech that he makes to all the people there that were opposed to him. It's used also later on. Paul gets put into prison and kind of makes his way through the circuit, and he stands on trial before Festus and Herod Agrippa, and he makes his apologia. He's not apologizing for being a Christian. He's defending the faith. He's defending Christ. He uses it when in the Christ. He uses it when in the letter of Philippians a couple times when he says that he's in prison for the defense of the gospel. So that's the sense in which it's used in the Lutheran confessions. Perhaps the most famous of them, besides Luther's Small Catechism, is the Augsburg Confession. So the Lutherans submitted to the emperor, this is what we believe and teach. And then the Catholics, they responded with his confutation, where they refuted what it said. And then the Lutherans responded with the apology of the Augsburg Confession. This is our defense of what we wrote and further clarification. So that's the answer that he talks about to anyone who asks for a reason for the hope that you have. Can we look at the context a little bit more? So when we look at what comes before and after it, just tell me what it is, what's the reason for the hope that you have, or does the context give us the impression that it's maybe a different situation? Sarah?
I guess I just think of like working in the corporate world, out to get everybody, and they have this piece, and it can bring up this. It's a noticeable difference.
Okay, so we have the context of suffering on account of what you're saying or on account of the way that you're behaving. It's in that context that he talks about giving a reason for the hope that you have. He says, do this with gentleness and respect, which sort of presumes that you might be inclined to respond the other way, talking about people who are attacking your way of life in Christ. I think normally when we hear this passage, it's just presented, as general like evangelism. The context is really more surrounded by hostility. And it doesn't just say, when you're in a situation like that, have an answer. It's not just about what you say. It's how you say it. It's not just about what you say. It's how you say it. It's the way that you live, so that those who attack your way of life, those who say, you Christians are haters, you just breed all these problems in the world, that the way that you carry yourself, a whole way of life, can show them that accusation is ridiculous. Apologetics, let's think of it very broadly as communicating God's truth in our present context clearly, and doing it in a whole life way. Not the guy on the debate stage that most of what he said was just like this. That's not what we're going for. Rita?
It just seems to also indicate a vicious cycle that you want to put in them maliciously disliking your Christianity, your good behavior, dark hates light, and yet you still have to keep up with that. Both your answer, your hope, and your gentleness and your kindness, because it's just going to, the other's just going to.
Very good. these situations, these conversations with people aren't 15-minute things, but imagine the prospects in your life as you're on this long road with them. It takes let them hear again and again, let them see again and again. Okay, we're out of time. So we will do this next time. How apologetics tailors the response to the threat. So we'll talk about some different threats. I just want to give you a preview of this now. I was kicking myself for forgetting to include the link in the weekly reminder, but I want to give you resources. In the time that we have in class, we'll have very fruitful discussion, but to get into the weeds kind of in this stuff requires more than I can give you in class. So I've made a list of resources, videos, podcasts, books, essays. We all consume things differently. You might not be up for a book, but videos, podcasts, there's almost always time when you're doing kind of other things to listen to that. So it's a living document. I have it in a Google Doc, and I will include a link to this in the weekly reminder for sure next time. And it's got tons and tons, everything that's referenced has a link. So you can go to the resource online, or you can go to Amazon to get it. I've also talked with Ryan, our education, to get it. I've also talked with Ryan, our education chairman, about filling up our library with a bunch of this stuff. One I want to hold up for you right now, and I don't have this one in there yet, is called Prepared to Answer. It's written by a professor at Martin Luther College. It's a companion volume. There's also more Prepared to Answer, and they're kind of like devotions. Each chapter is a reflection on a biblical reflection on an objection to Christianity, and he uses Bible narratives to answer it. These are good examples of talking with a misinformed or misguided friend. Excuse me? This, it's published by Northwestern Publishing House. I'm pretty sure you can also get it on Amazon, and we will soon have one in our church library too. Amazon, okay. So if you want me to, I try to limit the number of congregation-wide emails that I send. If you want a link to this before next Friday, send me an email asking for it, and I'll send it to you. Otherwise, I'll include it in the weekly reminder. Okay. Good. Well, I enjoyed our first class together, and I hope it's the first of many more fruitful discussions. Why don't we pray, and then we'll get ready for church. Lord Jesus, you promise us that as the world goes on and the end grows closer, that the love of many will grow cold and that many will turn away from you. Fill us with your love so that we may never grow cold or jaded to your mission of reaching out to the world with your life and peace. And we ask that you use this course to speak truth in a loving, articulate way, and that you might also use our discussions to address doubts that we may have in our own hearts because of things that we've heard from other people. Make me a faithful teacher, make us all faithful students.